The Galaxy S23 Ultra looks a ton like last year's phone, but after spending some more time with it, depending on who you are, there's more here than what meets the eye. Let's talk about it. The S23 Ultra might have you feeling deja vu if you're even remotely familiar with the S22 Ultra. I mean, look at them.
Those two different phones?
Yeah.
Oh, I should get my eyes checked. I thought that was the same thing. What's new about it, Ken?
Well, watch the video. I can't necessarily fault anyone for feeling cynical toward the new one at first glance. Samsung in many ways played this generation safe across the board. Looks aside, it was a given that this year's phone was going to get a spec bump to the newest flagship silicon. The cameras might have seen some improvement, but already had plenty of megapixels and zoom to the moon. Zoom zoom, Mazda. If you own an S22 Ultra, this year's phone won't convince you to upgrade. However, for everyone else that's either upgrading to something new after a few generations, or are looking among the best that Android has to offer, the S23 Ultra is a solid, reliable, and refined option despite the preconceptions. And so, here are some of the reasons why I think so. Performance and power is something people look for when it comes to upgrades. Not necessarily for heavy-hitting tasks, though that's certainly a factor for power users. However, wanting headroom for the sake of future-proofing for the next 2, 3, or even 4 years is a consideration I get when we're talking about phones that cost over $1,000. As I mentioned earlier, the S23 Ultra is powered by a new flagship chip. That's the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 that's slightly modified for Galaxy, offering a minor uptick in clock speed compared to the vanilla version of the chip. And it's already the best off-the-shelf processor you can get for a phone these days. While it's fair to expect performance bumps on a yearly basis for those of us in North America, this generation is big news for the rest of the world, where Samsung normally fits their Galaxy S flagships with the inferior Exynos SoCs.
I would just give all those to Google.
To be fair, Tensor, pretty good scraps. The S23 lineup includes that powerful Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 across the board, which could make all the difference for users looking to upgrade from Galaxies of the past. And even better if you spec up to higher storage and 12 gigs of RAM. Best of all, with the added power, the S23 Ultra also runs cooler to the touch compared to last year, which, if not for the performance benefits, certainly helps with comfort in the hand. Having used the S22 Ultra for the better part of a year, hopping over to the 23 Ultra brought some quality of life improvements that I didn't expect to be that meaningful, but in the day-to-day make all the difference if you happen to be cross-shopping between the two. First is the feel in the hand. You might not even pick up on it unless you were comparing the two side by side, but the S23 Ultra has a more squared off profile where the S22 tapers off. While this makes the phone feel a tad chunkier than last year, the grip is way more confidence-inspiring. Plus, with less of the screen rounding off the edge, there's reduced visual distortion on the edges, making for a better screen experience overall. And there's slightly more usable surface area to boot. Overall, a very welcome change to take more advantage of what was already a beautiful immersive display. Second is the battery life. On paper, the S23 Ultra stays unchanged compared to last year with a 5,000 mAh battery. However, as I love pointing out on this channel, paper specs are never the best indicator of real-world performance, and the S23 Ultra proves this true. Where the previous generation barely held on for a full day of mixed use, watching videos, playing games, and browsing social media, in my rough testing, the S23 Ultra can go a whole workday through the night and even into some of the next day without any hiccups. This improvement comes thanks to tweaks that, again, are more under the hood. Between the efficiency of that new Snapdragon chip and the screen sipping less power than last year without compromising on spec, this is yet another quality of life improvement I'd consider if you thought this year's Ultra was an easy pass. If you care about cameras, the ones on the S23 Ultra are also noteworthy. Got him. It's easy to shrug your shoulders and pass off judgment based on the spec sheet, but the upgrades offer pretty meaningful improvements. First, let's get this out of the way. When Samsung announced the 108 megapixel main camera and the 10x telephoto that could zoom 100x practically into space, in fact, they called it space zoom, 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 zoom. Those were already mind-boggling figures to wrap your head around. Fast forward to present day, we now have a 200 megapixel sensor, as well as that same 10x telephoto, but with improved processing to beef up image stabilization, especially for the rare times you actually want to stare at the moon. Do people really do that? Like, for real, this thing might be gimmicky, but it works like actual magic. What's more practical is the 200 megapixel sensor, which might seem overkill at first, but has benefits in sharpness and also in low light. It's certainly able to take pictures at that full resolution, which looks crispy as hell, and also fun to edit. But the benefit comes from pixel binning down to a 12.5 megapixel image. This doesn't just get you smaller file sizes for sharing, but combining 16 pixels to 1 helps to enhance detail, especially in tricky lighting environments. Low-key, the underdog among the cameras is the front-facing selfie lens. With a 12 megapixel sensor down from 40 megapixels last year, there were concerns about a drop in quality. But funny enough, there's barely a noticeable difference this year. Close up, subjects look about the same between the two cameras. However, the biggest trade-off I noticed was with the bokeh. Natural background blur looks way better on last year's camera. Though if you're one to lean on portrait mode, which Samsung, might I add, does very well, the difference is hardly there. Overall, in my eyes, the cameras on the S23 Ultra offer a good step forward that's worth consideration. As an enthusiast myself, I get why companies like Samsung and Apple receive hate for playing things safe, especially with their smartphones. But I'm gonna be real, companies don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel every single time. It's been like this for a while, but the majority of smartphone owners upgrade every 3 to 5 years. This trend, the pace, is part of what dictates progress, especially for a top-selling flagship line like the Galaxy S. Think of what the moniker flagship even means. It represents the essence of what Samsung has to offer, the core product many people think of when it comes to that brand. Putting myself in the company's shoes a bit, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to produce something revolutionary every single year. Not only does this set unrealistic expectations long-term, but it also alienates the average smartphone user. Nothing would feel worse than your $1,000 plus phone feeling out of date after 1 year. In fact, if you want something even more egregious, take a look at the Galaxy Z Fold 4, a phone which also took a minor leap this year, but that's like $1,800 at retail. And if the rumors are true, that's going to see a major upgrade later this year. So it's easy to complain about minor leaps, but be careful what you ask for. You don't want to regret your purchase later. Incremental upgrades give legacy users more opportunities to catch up in major ways. To someone that owns, say, a Galaxy Note 10, the S23 Ultra might finally be the one. For all of the pros and cons, I'm sure Samsung's happy with the S23 Ultra. And also, those that have been waiting a while to upgrade will certainly love the phone as well. Enthusiasts seeking the bleeding edge might complain a bit, but honestly, that's totally fine. Thanks very much for watching this episode of Denki Channel. Let me know, what do you think of the Galaxy S23 Ultra? Also, if you guys like the content here, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell to get notified on when content goes live. And otherwise, I'll catch y'all later. Phonal. I gotta stop doing that because then I don't know how the hell to say it.